All right, in this lesson, we are going to be talking about repeat sentence and read aloud. This is our second lesson, and in this one, we are covering both repeat sentence and read aloud because they both have similar skills that we are going to be touching on, all right? So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Get ready and get excited for the class today because it's going to be a very important one for your speaking test. Right, so we'll, as always, start with the agenda. So as I discussed, there are going to be two things that we'll be touching on. It's going to be read aloud and it's going to be repeat sentence. In read aloud, we'll start with read aloud first. So we've got intro, we'll talk about what read aloud is, and then we'll talk about strategies. We'll touch on pronouncing individual sounds and words, and then we will talk about chunking words into groups. This is something that you have studied previously in your last lesson. And then we're going to be talking about using correct sentence stress. Now we're introducing stress this time around. So we know that we don't say word by word things, but where to stress, that's something we're going to be talking about in here. Obviously, the things that are tested here is going to be the stress, and we're going to be talking about intonation as well. So intonation is one of the skills that will be tested, and then we're going to do time practice of read aloud, and then we will also discuss where you should decide to pause. So if you wanted to pause somewhere, and you will have to pause when you're doing read aloud, what can you use punctuation in that case to guide your decision of pausing. And then we will talk about stressing the words with important information. So we will discuss what type of information or what type of words they are, where you should stress, and then we'll be talking about scoring. Obviously, scoring, as you know, there are enabling skills that are scored, and also the communicative skills. So we will be talking about those things, and we're going to be practicing again, a little bit of more extra practice. Then we will move on and talk about repeat sentence. And repeat sentence will introduce what a repeat sentence task is in your PTE test. And then we will talk about strategies for repeat sentence. We will talk about phrasing of sentences. And what it is. Obviously, when you are trying to repeat sentence, you will need a skill that is called phrasing of sentences. You'll have to understand how the sentence is phrased. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about stress and intonation as well. And we will talk about the scoring of your repeat sentence, and we will also practice repeat sentence in timed conditions. So let's get into it. I'm really excited. This is going to be a little bit longer lesson, but stay tuned because this is going to give you a lot of practical skills that are needed for your PTE test. So let's dive right into it. Okay, now number one, let's introduce read aloud. What is a read aloud part of the test of your PTE? In read aloud, you get about 30 to 40 seconds to read text, which is about one paragraph long, and you have to read it silently first, and then you have to, so you get 30 to 40 seconds to read it silently, and then you prepare, and then you read aloud in your 30 to 40 seconds, additional 30 to 40 seconds once the recording starts recording your response. So while you're reading aloud, you should use punctuation to decide where to pause, and we will go over that in more detail later on, how the punctuation helps you to decide where you want to pause, and then stress the words that carry important information. So what are the words that you want to stress? This is just an introduction, so I'll dive right into it. I will make it easier for you to understand, and we will really look at it in detail in terms of what are the words that carry important information. So moving on to the strategies. Obviously, there are strategies before you actually respond to the task. So you get 30 to 40 seconds before the microphone opens for your recording, for recording your response. You get 30 to 40 seconds where you actually read the text and you read it silently. So before reading the text, you have 30 to 40 seconds and you read the text silently, then focusing on the content of the text. So when you're reading the text, you really need to focus on the content, and you really need to understand what your paragraph is conveying to you as well in terms of the meaning. Briefly rehearse any unknown words. So if you come across any unknown words, you just should take it as a challenge for you to give it a try. And if you don't really understand the word, it's completely fine. You keep moving forward. You don't have to pause and really stress about it, because if you stress about it, it's going to put you in a panic mode, and you will mess up the rest of the test as well. So you don't want to stress about anything that you're not aware of. Okay, so you let it go. And then in terms of speaking, once you hear the tone and starts recording, and it shows you that it's recording, you straight away record your response and read aloud. Okay, so that's something that you should be aware of before speaking. Now, while you're speaking, while you're recording your response, you should imagine that you're in front of the audience. You should imagine an audience that you're presenting this this paragraph that has been presented to you to an audience. Let's say it's your friends and family. You should always think about that, because then you will take it seriously. You will, it's very odd to just talk to the computer. Right now, I'm talking to a computer, and it is to be honest, a little bit uncomfortable or unfamiliar, unnatural, I should say. This is the word I'm looking for. Unnatural way of talking to the screen. It's not a human being, so it's kind of unnatural, but you need to build this habit. I mean, for me at first it was very unnatural as well, but now I have a habit of talking to the screen and imagining in my head. I'm imagining that there is like 20, 50 people sitting and listening to my my lecture, and that's how I take this seriously, and I am able to uh, form my ideas and express myself. So you should also do that. It's really a good skill to have in your back pocket when it comes to reading aloud. Okay, then you should make an attempt to on unknown words and move on, because you don't want to get stuck. Like I discussed before, if you come across any unfamiliar word, try to give your best shot in terms of pronouncing the word. If you're not familiar with the word and you don't know how to pronounce it, you can just skip the word, or at least give it a go. Pronounce it incorrectly and just move on. Do not worry about it too much, and try to get it right, and try to repeat yourself. So that's something that we will talk next. It's do not go back and correct yourself or hesitate. So in scoring, you will learn that correcting yourself is the worst thing that you can do, because what you're doing is basically adding more information. So if the word is here, for example, do not go back, and then for example, I said do not go front and then back. What I'm doing is I'm adding another word, and I'm deleting a word. So addition and deletion is not acceptable, and you will lose your marks. So that's why do not repeat yourself. If you made a mistake and and you're aware of it, do not correct yourself, because you will lose. As a computer, it doesn't understand that you're correcting yourself. It understands that you're probably adding another word that is not there in the first place. So try to be careful with that. Talking about give a single response. So obviously when you start responding and you start recording your response, it should be one single response. It shouldn't be, for example, you started a response and you said, oh, I made a mistake, so I got to go back and repeat from the scratch and start from the scratch. Do not do that mistake, because once you start recording again, you will start losing marks if you added more words. So you got the idea there. Go on to the next item once you finish the speaking. So once you have finished the speaking, you move on to the next one. You are in the rhythm now. You keep the rhythm going, and do not wait for the response to record your silence. So once you've finished, the best thing is to get on to the next one and keep going and keep moving forward. Okay. So those are the strategies while you're speaking. Now we're going to be talking about, in our first activity, we'll be discussing how we pronounce individual sounds and words. So I want you to pause the video here and I want you to have a go at pronouncing these words. And when you come back, we will see if you got the pronunciation correctly. This is just one list of words, but you can make your own list if you're not familiar. And if you're reading read aloud and you're practicing read aloud, you should write down the words that you're not familiar with and you are struggling with, and you should make a list like this, and then you should learn the pronunciation. The best way to learn a pronunciation of an unfamiliar word, if you came up with a word that you are unfamiliar and you don't know the meaning, that is one word that you want to learn the pronunciation of. And the best way to learn it is obviously to repeat the correct pronunciation, to go on Google and search the correct pronunciation, just write how to pronounce a certain word, and it will give you an American and a British pronunciation of the word, and you can choose whichever you like, and you can learn the pronunciation and repeat at least 20 times. So for example, the first word here is these. So try to count it till 20, and repeat it 20 times, and your mouth, what you're doing is basically you're exercising your mouth to get used to the flow of the structure. So if I say this 20 times, my mouth is getting that exercise going, and the next time it will be easier for my mouth to kind of produce that sound. So that's how you want to do for your unfamiliar words. There are some words that you pronounce incorrectly. So if you are in any doubt that you pronounce those words incorrectly, just double check, go on Google and double check if the pronunciation is correct, if your stress, a syllable stress is correct. And then you also do the same thing. You try to fix your pronunciation. This time it's not a new word. You're trying to fix your old habit. And what you want to do is you want to repeat 20 times to fix that old habit, because your mouth needs to get that training and exercise, and your tongue needs that exercise for it to be responding in a correct way. So I hope you have tried to pause the video and try to pronounce these words. I'm going to do it now as I do myself, and you can just hear them out. So the first one, these, 3, bin, pin, graph, graduate, glad, liberate, river, nibble, thought, taught, development, statistics, services, variables, analyze, analysis, analyses, arduous, distribution, wanted, changed, walked. All right. So some of these past tenses, for example, changed. Some people, you should know, where we say we skip the E and we just D in the end. Changed, wanted. So it has the id sound, but changed, you don't have the id sound, you just have changed. So we're skipping the E, and walked. So we're skipping the E there as well. So some of the past tense of some verbs, you want to be clear about those pronunciations. Some people might say it walked. It's not walked, it's walked. It's a common problem. A lot of my students that I came across had these issues, so we had to fix that. So there are rules that you can learn regarding this, but it's best to learn naturally and by repeating, like I discussed earlier. Okay, we'll keep moving. The next thing that we're going to be talking about, obviously, I want you to pause again and try to read this paragraph one time. We're going to be using this paragraph for exercises, and we will learn about intonation and stress using this paragraph. But I really want you to learn the pronunciation of these words. So let's pause the video now and try to read all of these words and see if your pronunciation matches with mine, or you can also look it up on Google. I encourage you to do that if you're unfamiliar with any of the words here or the pronunciation of any of these words here. Okay, so we're back. I hope you got a chance to read each word. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be reading it naturally, and I'm going to be pronouncing all the words clearly, as clear as possible. And I'm going to just go slow so that you can hear the correct pronunciation of all of these words. So here we go. The development of easy-to-use statistical software has changed the way statistics is being taught and learned. Students can make transformations of variables, create graphs of distributions of variables, and select among statistical analyses all at a click of a button. However, even with these advancements, students sometimes find statistics to be an arduous task. Okay, so hopefully you got an idea of how to pronounce all of these words. If you found your pronunciation was different than mine, go on Google, check it out as well for yourself, and learn the pronunciation again. The best thing is that you can do if you want to improve your pronunciation is to repeat your sentences at least 20 times for you to get familiar. Your body, your tongue needs to get that exercise going, and after that it will come out naturally. Okay, so this is one of the skills that we learned in a previous lecture, and chunking words is one of those skills that the reason why we chunk words in English is obviously to make it meaningful. So when we are reading something, when you're speaking, you chunk the phrasal verb. For example, there are different words that we chunk together to make it sense for the listener. And we as listeners, when we're listening as well, when other people are speaking in this fashion, chunking words and grouping them together, it's meaningful for us to understand what they're saying, right? So again, I'm going to read this out. In English, it sounds very strange if we pause after every word. It sounds very strange. We don't do that. In some languages, people do that, but it's not. In English, it causes confusion. So as a general rule, we tend to group words together into phrases. Obviously, phrases, for example, noun phrases, we've got prepositional phrases, verbal phrases, and like lesson number 1 we discussed some of these when we say them, right? So I've got a sentence here. Words which form a phrase you are usually grouped together when we say them. So I did a little bit of pause, but if I were to just say it without any pause, again, it will be too fast and it will not be very meaningful. So if I said it like this, words which form a phrase are usually grouped together when we say them. Well, it's not as bad but if you pause them and accurate and a proper appropriate places, then it will be much more meaningful. So hear this out. I'm gonna pause now. Words which form a phrase are usually grouped together when we say them, right? So, but the pauses should be at an appropriate places. It shouldn't be an inappropriate place. For example, here we've got a lot of pauses, and in this place, for example, words which form a phrase are usually grouped together when we say them. Sounds like I'm rapping or something, but it's just not. It's not making sense, right? It's really hard for a person hearing this to make sense of this all. He's going to be like a little bit shocked what exactly is happening here. So you want to understand, where to pause. And you should always know that there could be more than one possible way of pausing. Okay, this is very important. Let me make this point because you might be thinking, oh, how would I know where to pause? Well, you will have to use your intuition and you will have to use some of these rules, but don't focus too much on rules. I always tell students, some of the rules are hard and fast and some of them are not hard and fast. So you shouldn't worry too much on this one. This is not a hard and fast rule. There are more than one ways of pausing and chunking words together. And you should just use your intuition and really think about how you want to come across and how you want to explain things and what meaning you're trying to convey. So we'll keep moving. This one, I've got a same paragraph. Of course, we're using this paragraph to build on this. So please pause the video here, and I want you to practice your pausing skills and phrasing skills, and I want you to try chunking them together, chunking the words together, and then when we come back, we will see where you should be chunking the words together. Okay, so I'll give you a minute for you to read it out. Okay, you must have gotten some time to read it. And now we're going to look at one possible way of chunking the words together. This is one possible way. Let me make it very, very clear. So the suggested answer, and this is an answer suggested by PTE themselves. This is one way where it makes makes sense when you pause in this way and you try to read it this way. It makes a little bit more sense if you just read it without pausing at all. So pausing is super important, and the point that I'm trying to get to is that chunking words is allowing you to pause and give an idea, present an idea, pause, then present another idea, so that it's more meaningful for people to understand what you're trying to say. Okay, so let's read it out. The development of easy-to-use statistical software has changed the way statistics is being taught and learned. Students can make transformations of variables, create graphs of distributions of variables, and select among statistical analyses, all at a click of a button. However, even with these advancements, students sometimes find statistics to be an arduous task. It's much more meaningful if I say it that way. That's the message here. All right, now we're going to learn sentence stress. Okay, so we talked about chunking words and we discussed that in our previous lesson as well, but now we're going to be focusing on sentence stress. Sentence stress is very, very important. So, but how do we know where to stress? A lot of people say, well, sentence stress is important, but do we know the words that we should be stressing? So this is what we're going to find out in this part of the lesson. So let me read the sentence for you. It's not what you say, but the way you say it, right? Repeat after me. It's not what you say, but the way you say it. So here we've got the words that are stressed here are not, say, way, and say, right? So what are the most common words that are stressed in any paragraph? Are nouns, adjectives, or verbs, and we normally do not stress prepositions or articles. Not is a negative, and that's the reason why we're stressing it. So if there's something that you're trying to make a point that this is negative, then in that case you can stress not. But if you don't want to emphasize on that, it depends on your message as well. So if you don't want to emphasize on that, then you can skip not, right? So it's very important that we use stress to emphasize or clarify the meaning, right? So different people can say it in a different way if they mean something else. So always remember that people will stress the words based on what meaning they want to convey. Okay, so you should always remember, think about the meaning as well. So in this, again, we've got the same paragraph here. We're going to use this paragraph to really smash and really learn all the skills that are needed for repeat sentence and read aloud. Okay. So now I want you to think about what are the words that are stressed. Okay. And then we are going to check where you thought the stress was. And then we will discuss possible answers as well. Again, there is no right or wrong answer. There is wrong answer, but there is more than one possible answer. So you should always remember that there could be one possible answers depending on the meaning that the speaker is trying to convey. Okay. So pause the video here. Try to stress the words that you think should be stressed, and then we'll come back and check the words that you stressed. Okay, so this is one way that we stress. One way. I'm not saying it's wrong or right. It's saying one possible way. There are other possible ways of stressing. It's just remember this. All right. So, for example, this is a PT suggested answer. The development. So I'm going to read it out, and you just listen to my stress level, right? The development of easy-to-use statistical software has changed the way statistics is being taught and learned. Students can make transformations of variables, create graphs of distributions of variables, and select among statistical analyses, all at a click of a button. However, even with these advancements, students sometimes find statistics to be an arduous task, right? So these are some of the words that are stressed, and the speaker is really stressing these words to emphasize on these ones. The development of easy-to-use statistical software has changed the way statistics is being taught and learned. Students can make transformations of variables and create graphs of distributions of variables and select among statistical analyses, all at a click of a button. All at a click of a button. However, so it's contrasting, it's using the stress to contrast. Even with these advancements, students sometimes find statistics to be an arduous task, right? So really depends on how you want to stress things, and this is just one possible answer, like we discussed. But if you stressed it in a different way, as long as it's making sense, you should know you have done a good job. Okay, so remember that. All right, don't be fooled by this is the only way. If I didn't stress it in this way, what's going to happen? Am I going to lose marks? No, that's not true. Okay, it could be, just don't stress it. Don't stress the unimportant words. If you think that development of easy to use is important here, then stress it. If you think it's not really important, then don't stress it, right? So important bits. The most important thing is to stress the most important words, and most commonly we stress nouns. You can see here the nouns are mostly stressed. Verbs are mostly stressed. Adjectives are mostly stressed. When we're contrasting is stressed. All is stressed as well. So all at a click of a button. So all is also stressed. Something that you think is very, very important. Okay. All right. Now we're going to be talking about intonation. All right. This is one of the most important aspects as well. It's it's as important as stress, but it's also very important. Now, in English, let me give you a history of English. If we just don't use intonation and inflections when we speak, people are just gonna think that we are rude. We just outright rude. We are rude people, and we don't use. So even to sound polite, let me give you an advice. If you want to sound polite in English, you need to use intonation. You need to use inflection, to rising and falling speech, rising and falling sounds. And rising and falling sounds makes us polite, makes us human, and it's easy for people to understand things. So that's why it's very important that we use intonation. And it also helps us to convey the meaning out as well, right? So we use intonation to express meaning and also the attitude. So for example, if you just sounded, if I read this sentence, for example, we use intonation to express meaning and attitude. How does it sound? Does it sound rude? It sounds a little bit rude to me because it's monotone. I'm not using any rising and falling intonation, right? But if I say to you, we use intonation to express meaning and attitude, now it sounds polite. Now it sounds meaningful. That's exactly why we use it, right? Now, let's try these sentences here. Clearly, it's dropping. Clearly, starts clearly dropping. Clearly, we were going to be disappointed. Disappointed, right? So we will learn the rules, why but again, the rules are there to just guide you. It's your intuition, and it's also your practice, and it's also how you want to, as a speaker, communicate. There are a lot of factors. The rules, don't worry about rules too much about here, okay? Actually, it isn't very important. So you're seeing that most of the times when the sentence is ending, we are going in a falling intonation. It's actually polite to go in a falling intonation. All right, there are some rules. So I'll give it to you. You might be asking, please, Mohsin, give us some rules. And I mean, rules are there. It's very important for you to have rules, but don't get bogged down in rules, because, some of the times the rules are not going to really help you, right? Because you will remember the rules, but you don't know how to apply them. So always try to focus on practice. That's what I say to my students. So I'm going to give you a few rules here to explain. So in general, we use falling intonation towards the end of the sentence. So like I discussed, in the end of the sentence, you have a falling intonation when it is a statement. So if you're making a statement, clearly we are going to be disappointed. That's the statement. Actually, it isn't very important. That's the statement as well, right? Command, if you're commanding someone, go wash the dishes. Go, starting with a rising intonation, go wash the dishes. Go clean my car. It's a command, commanding someone, command, but it's falling in the end, okay? And if it's a what question with WA, so who, where, what, all of these questions, which we use a falling intonation in the end. So let's look at some of the example. I'm practicing using intonation today. It's falling in the end, right? What is it? It's a statement, right? Chunk these words into groups. That's a command. Chunk these words into groups. It's falling in the end. Chunk these words into groups. Falling. Which words should I stress in this sentence? So it's falling in the end as well, right? So you should remember, see, these are some of the rules. Again, if you're going to take it too seriously and you're going to be just thinking about the rules, oh, which one is that? Which one is that? You could really, get really, really confused. So again, look at these rules. My job as a teacher is to give you the rules, but I do suggest that, you still use them with caution and really try to learn and speak English naturally. Okay, and try speaking. I mean, speaking will really help you, and also listening. Listening is going to help you because you will recognize patterns of people using intonation. Okay, and repeat sentence. That's what we're going to do. We're going to listen and we're going to repeat, and we're going to repeat the stress and intonations as well. So that will be perfect practice. Okay, we'll move on. We use rising intonation within sentences that list items. So in rising intonation, where do we use rising intonation as opposed to falling intonation? With rising intonation, we use in the sentences that list items with commas or semicolons separating them, or yes or no questions. For example, I need to practice chunking, sentence stress, and intonation. So at the end, it's again falling. But if you have list, if you have few things that you're doing, or you're buying, I need to buy eggs, water, milk, and fruit, right? So if you have list, you go with fall. Go with rise, and then you fall in the end, and you'll add your last option list of things. All right. So in this one, I want you to draw up and down arrow where you think the intonation should be. A note at the top where you can read individual speakers may use slightly different patterns of intonation depending on their regional dialect or accent and the way they want to communicate the information they are presenting. The suggested intonation pattern on the worksheet is one possible way. So again, even the PD is telling you, or Pearson is telling you, that there is one possible way of in using the intonation, right? It depends on how you want to communicate the information. Really depends on the on your intent. So please do it and just come up with your possible answer. Again, this is a possible answer. It's not the one true answer. Okay. Pause the video here and draw up and down arrows where you think the intonation should be rising and where the intonation should be falling. Pause the video here and we'll come back and check the answer. One possible answer. Okay, so this is the suggested answer. Here you can see we've got down arrows and we've got up arrows. And you know what, this is a little bit contradictory as well, because you know some of the arrows here, for example, however, has a down arrow here. Later on we'll see an up arrow there as well. So it really, I mean, Pearson is also sort of kind of confused where they should use rising and falling, but obviously, you know, by at the end of the sentences, normally you see there is a downward arrow, so which makes quite sense as well. If there is a list, obviously their intonation is going up for sure. So we're gonna read it out with the intonation patterns and stress patterns as well that we learned from the previous section. So I'm gonna read it out using this possible way of reading, okay? But you can have your own different way. As long as it's making sense, it has meaning, you can roll with your own pattern of intonation. Okay, so I'm going to read this out. The development of easy-to-use statistical software has changed the way statistics is being taught and learned. Students can make transformations of variables, create graphs of distributions of variables, and select among statistical analyses, all at a click of a button. However, even with these advancements, the students sometimes find statistics to be an arduous task. Okay, so however, me personally, I will emphasize it. I will have a rising intonation. However, and because that's how I would want to contrast. But and you will see Pearson does that later on as well. But again, it's a one possible suggested answer. That's why we call it suggested answer. All right, so timed practice. So it's time for us to practice the read aloud. So I want you the test conditions and give yourself 35 seconds to prepare. Read it silently and then read aloud in your 35 seconds. So time starts now, 35 seconds, and then read and repeat. So you can pause the video here and you know what, you can come back and see me how I'm reading it. Okay, so hopefully you got a time to practice this, repeating, and I will just read it out so that you can hear how I'm repeating these sentences. And you can see if some stress patterns match or intonations match. Again, it's one possible way of doing it, but this is how I would do it personally. Once you have picked a general topic for your paper, you need to come up with a thesis. Your thesis is the main and focal point of your paper and is the position you will take on your particular topic. Formulating a strong thesis is one of the most important things you will need to do to ace your paper. Okay, let's start with the next one. Many papers you write in college will require you to include quotes from one or more sources. Even if you don't have to do it, integrating a few quotes into your writing can add life and persuasiveness to your arguments. The key is to use quotes to support a point you're trying to make rather than just include them to fill space. Networking is easy and fun because it taps into this human predilection to talk about ourselves when asked. Consider successful networking as little more than the process of guiding a person to tell you about his life, what he's doing, the company that employs him, and his current industry. So you might have noticed that I'm using a lot of emphasis because I'm in the back of my head, I'm thinking I'm presenting it to an audience. Even though I'm talking to a screen right now, this is an online course. I don't normally talk like this. I do a lot better when I'm, with people, because I can see the people responding. I can see their reaction, their faces. But you know what? I'm doing this, and it is unnatural. It is unnatural to speak to a computer. But I'm thinking back in my head, there are a lot of people watching this, and there are a lot of people in the audience, and I'm addressing them. And that's what you need to do, and that's how you would get all the emphasis, and you can move around as well. Don't try to sit like a robot, because when you sit like a robot, it's going to impact your reading skills. We're going to do another read aloud, but this time this read aloud is actually a repeat sentence. Okay, so what I want you to do this time, and before we jump into the repeat sentence section, I'm going to read these sentences, and you read them aloud after listening to my sentence. And you can read them as well. You can read them and you can hear them. So it's a warm-up activity for you. But in repeat sentence, you will just hear them and you'll have to repeat. But here, I'm giving you a chance to read it as well. Okay, so you ready? Okay, let's do it. All right, number 1. We will divide the class into 3 discussion groups. The student welfare officer can help with questions about exam technique. Most of the students were not able to attend Professor Green's seminar. Some of the references in the essay were old and out of date. Okay, so I hope you got a chance to repeat the sentences. Now we're going to, okay, we've got 4 more. So we're going to, again, do the same thing. Just listen and try to repeat, and you can read aloud as well at the same time. Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture. The circulation desk is located on the ground floor. Tutorials are held for 2 hours every Thursday during semester. International students can get help with locating housing near the university. Right? So I'm going real slow, and the reason why I'm going real slow is that you can hear the emphasis, the stress that I'm using, and the intonation that I'm using. And you can copy the same. So try to copy whenever you do, and I will discuss in detail now. For repeat sentence, you will have to use all of that. Okay, now we didn't talk about when to decide pause, right? So this is where we're going to see when you decide to pause, and what are the things that can help you decide where to pause. Okay, so break the text into meaningful chunk that we already learned, right? Intonation goes up at the start and falls in the end. Photography's gaze widened during the early years of 20th century, and as the snapshot camera became increasingly popular, the making of photographs became increasingly available to a wide cross-section of the public. The British people grew accustomed to and were hungry for the photographic image, right? So these are all meaningful chunks, and what's helping is the punctuation. So the reason why we read this one again is we want to see where to pause, and the punctuation mark. So you can see there is a punctuation mark and there is a full stop. Whenever you see punctuation mark and full stop, you try to pause, right? So here you can see increasingly popular. It's got a comma, you pause there, and then you've got cross section of the public. There is a full stop, so remember to pause there. So these are easy ones. These are easy things where you can always pause, because these rules you can really learn. These are hard and fast rules where you must pause. The British people grew accustomed to. There is a comma, pause, and we're hungry for, comma, pause, and the photographic image. So not always you will have this help of punctuation to help you decide, but whenever that help is readily available, try to use good use of it. And again, we'll talk about, the intonation, read important words slightly louder. So when you're stressing something, obviously you want to read something a little bit louder to emphasize. For example, development here, development of easy to use. So what I'm doing is I'm reading it a little bit louder, and you're going to use the rising and falling intonation. So we've discussed this. Try to just remember that. I'm going to read it one more time for you so that you remember. Here you could see, however, and this is again given by Pearson, the intonation goes up, right? So again, we said it's possible answers, not a hard and fast rule. There are more than one correct answers. So I'm going to read this out in a different intonation patterns, but let's hear this out. The development of easy-to-use statistical software has changed the way statistics is being taught and learned. Students can make transformations of variables, create graphs of distributions of variables, and select among statistical analyses, all at a click of a button. However, even with these advancements, students sometimes find statistics to be an arduous task. Okay, so you saw there's different way of pronouncing and using the intonation patterns. Okay, now we're going to talk about scoring. We haven't touched on the scoring. So you get marks for content. Okay, so if you speak all the words in the correct order, you get full marks. But if there's, given that you don't add anything or you don't delete anything, if you're going to add something, then you're going to obviously that's why you don't want to repeat anything, because if you repeat something, you're adding stuff and you don't want to delete either. So if there is a word that you don't know, at least try it. All you're going to do is maybe you're either going to get it right or you're going to get it wrong, which is fine. But if you're not reading it, it's a deletion is counted as deletions, you're going to lose marks. Oral fluency is super important. So your speech should be smooth, effortless, and natural rate of speech. No hesitation, so you shouldn't hesitate. So oral fluency is very, very important. Some people are just nervous and they hesitate, and what happens is that they lose marks. It doesn't mean that your English is bad. Your English might be amazing, but what happens is that you just couldn't handle the stress of the test day. So if you have the stress of test day and you're nervous, then you're going to have issues. And you're going to be hesitating, and repetition, obviously don't repeat. That's something that we have discussed before. And then false start, obviously, what is false start? So by false start, we mean is that you started repeating the sentence, or you started reading aloud, but then what you did is that you made a mistake and you realize, I want to go back and I want to start again. That's called a false start. You never do that, because obviously, you want to avoid additions and deletions, right? In terms of pronunciation, the speech is understandable by most speakers. So obviously, a normal speaker should be able to understand you. That's pronunciation. We've learned, we've done a lot of work in pronunciation, but in any doubt, obviously, try to go on Google and understand, if you want to learn the pronunciation of a word, try to go and repeat it at least 20 times. That's my advice to you. Note, it affects your reading and speaking skills. Obviously, you have two types of skills that are tested in terms of scoring. You've got reading and speaking, and you've got oral fluency and pronunciation. So in communicative skills, you've got reading and speaking. So it's not just speaking, although it's in speaking section, you get marks for your reading as well. And in terms of enabling skills, you get marks for oral fluency and pronunciation. Okay. So those are two major parts that are tested. Okay, so we're going to do the timed practice now. So basically you have the paragraph here, and you're going to be reading the paragraph. And you've got 35 seconds. You read it silently, and then you've got 35 more seconds, pause here, and then you're going to be listening. And then what I'm going to be sharing with you is obviously I will be sharing with you B1, B2, and C1 responses. Okay, so you can pause the video here and then come back, and then I will be sharing So hopefully you got a chance to pause the video and do this task on your own. Now we will be listening to some of the responses for B1 response, B2 response, C1 response. So let's listen.
Once most animals reach adulthood, they stop growing. In contrast, even plants that are thousands of years old continue to grow new needles, add new wood, and produce cones and new flowers, almost as if parts of their bodies remain forever young. The secrets of plant growth are regions of tissue that can produce cells that later develop into specialized tissues.
Right, so that was B1, and obviously we'll talk about what are some of the things that were missing. That's the reason why I got B1. Pronunciation is one major one that I can hear that there was a lot of pronunciation errors. In terms of content, I think she covered most of the words, but we will discuss that in a later section. But we will just keep going. We'll listen to B2 response now.
Once most animals reach adulthood, they stop growing. In contrast, even plants that are thousands of years old continue to grow new needles, add new wood, and produce cones and new flowers, almost as if parts of their bodies remain forever young. The secrets of plant growth are regions of tissue that can produce cells that later develop into specialized tissues.
Right, so I could hear a lot of pronunciation errors and repetitions as well. So, I mean, that's something that we said we're gonna avoid. So be very careful. He's repeating himself when he's making errors, and if you make errors, then just don't repeat yourself. All right, C1, let's go.
Once most animals reach adulthood, they stop growing. In contrast, even plants are thousands of years old continue to grow new needles and new woods and produce cones and new flowers, almost as if parts of their bodies remain forever young. The secrets of plant growth are regions of tissue that can produce cells that later develop into specialized tissues.
So this is a good response. Covers pronunciation is good, but obviously what you might have noticed is that it's without any pause. It's the intonation is kind of monotone and it's without any pause. So that's why it gets C1. It gets really good response, but this person probably is nervous, and that's the reason why they're not pausing at all. So that's something you want to avoid, and that's why we want to chunk the words together, and we want to pause, and we want to also use the punctuation. So she hasn't. What was missing here was that when there was some punctuation marks like commas and full stops, she's not really pausing there. So some of the things that you need to keep in mind. Right. So here, this is a PD commentary here, and it says, in B1 the speech was staccato and labored. The rate of speech is uneven and phrasing is irregular, inappropriate stress and incorrect pronunciation. So obviously the pronunciation was an issue here. Stress was definitely missing. Some of the consonants might require listeners to adjust to the accent of the speaker. Obviously it was causing some issues with the meaning as well, so I didn't really understand the meaning there. So B2, obviously one word is omitted and one word is read inaccurately. So again, it's counting all the words that you omit. If you add words or delete words, it's counting. Their algorithm is going to be calculating all the errors that way, and you want to make sure that you don't do that. Phrases is somewhat staccato as well, and there are 2 repetitions. The repetition is something you want to avoid. Omissions of words or incorrect pronunciation of some consonants does not affect understanding. C1, one word is omitted. Speech is spoken at a conversational rate. So only one word is omitted, right? The speech is spoken at a conversational rate to demonstrate appropriate phrasing. Minor pronunciation errors do not affect understanding, but in my opinion, I feel like there was no pause at all. It was just too fast without any pauses, and punctuation pauses were also missed. So something that you should bear in mind as well. Okay, we'll keep moving. Read aloud item number 2. So you can pause the video here. So welcome back. So you must have got a chance of doing it 30 seconds you've got 30 seconds, 35 seconds, about 40 seconds. It says 40 seconds, so you can read for 40 seconds silently and then read aloud 40 seconds, using all those pronunciation and things that we talked about. Okay, we're gonna listen to B1 now.
Analysts were impressed by the improvement in margins reported across all regions, apart from the United Kingdom, and said that this reflected a clear effort to improve profitability across the business. Although the turnaround is still in its early stages and the valuation looks full, given the challenge of turning around such a large and complex business, this is certainly an impressive start.
Right. So a lot of words are actually not even there, but she's adding there. And it's just not, she's probably misreading the words as well. So although she says also impressive, she says impulsive and all these kind of things. So yeah, you get, I mean, the reason why I'm playing some of the responses so that you can see what types of errors students make, and you might be one of them that may be making the same errors. You would want to avoid that if you don't want to get B1 level score. Okay, we'll look at B2 now.
Analysts were impressed by the improvement in margins reported across all regions apart from the United Kingdom, and said that this reflected a clear effort to improve profitability across the business. Although the turnaround is still in its early stages and the valuation looks full, given the challenge of turning around such a large and complex business, this is certainly an impressive start.
Right. So he's done a good job of reading all the words, but obviously some of the words that he was pronouncing was the pronunciation has really it puts people in trouble to really understand, what he's trying to say. So some of the words are not pronounced correctly, and that will be one of the major issue that you get B2, but it was certainly better than the last response. So now we're going to listen to C1.
Analysts were impressed by the improvement in margins reported across all regions apart from the United Kingdom, and said that this reflected a clear effort to improve profitability across the business. Although the turnaround is still in its early stages and the valuation looks full, given the challenge of turning around such a large and complex business, this is certainly an impressive start.
Right. So you can see the pronunciation is great. It's a lot better than B2 and B1. And I can easily understand, what the speaker is saying. But again, what I felt is that it's too fast and there's lack of pausing. So you would want to pause. I mean, I'm telling you, a lot of people think that they will speak fast, you will get full marks to C1 level. Yeah, you might get C1, but if you're aiming for C2 or 79, 90 in your speaking test, then I would argue that you should pause and you should have a steady pace rather than a fast and slow pace sort of a response. All right, so item number 2, again, it's you can pause here and read the PT feedback here as well. But I'm not gonna read it fully. You can pause the video and read it on your own. I'll just give you my opinion of what I think each response was, which I've already done, and we'll move on to item number 3. All right, so pause the video again here. You've got 40 seconds, read it silently, and then read aloud in your 40 seconds. Okay, so I hope you got a chance to read this paragraph aloud. Now we're going to review B1 response.
The development of easy-to-use statistical software has changed the way statistics is being taught and learned. Students make transformation of variables, create graphs of distribution of variables, and select among statistical analysis all at the click of a button. However, even with this advancement, students must sometimes still find statistics to be an arduous task.
Right. So in this one, he's repeating himself, and I mean, repetitions, a lot of hesitation, mispronunciation, pretty much everything, a mixed bag of everything. And that's why it scores. I mean, pronunciation, you want to improve pronunciation. I think if you don't want to score B1 or B2, you definitely need to improve your pronunciation, and just make a list of the words like I discussed, you know, make a table of words that you are unfamiliar with, or maybe and it will only come by, you know, reading a lot, doing a lot of practice. So if I'm making you practice 10 with me, maybe go ahead and I would argue, you know, do at least 100 of that before, 100 of read aloud activities before you go into the test and the real test. And then you will have a better chance of, you know, coming across words that you are not familiar with, and some of these things repeat in exams. So if this may be the one that you might get, or maybe similar to this, because obviously it's going to be an academic piece of work, and you might you know, see these words again in your test. So that's why it's important for you to make a list of words that you're unfamiliar with, and if you think that if you're doubtful that some of your pronunciation, you pronounce words in an incorrect way, please go on Google and get the correct pronunciation and repeat at least 20 times and practice your pronunciation. To B2.
The development of easy-to-use statistical software has changed the way statistics is being taught and learned. Students can make transformations of variables, create graphs of distribution of variables, and select among statistical analysis, all at the click of a button. However, even with these advancements, students sometimes still find statistics to be an arduous task.
Right. Again, so it's a better response, but obviously struggling with some of the pronunciation. Again, the pronunciation is the key here, as I can see. You know, if you want to get to at least C1, you want to fix your pronunciation skills. I mean, you want to fix your pronunciation of words. Okay, we'll move on to C1.
The development of easy-to-use statistical software has changed the way statistics is being taught and learned. Students can make transformations of variables, create graphs of distributions of variables, and select among statistical analysis at all the click of a button. However, even with these advancements, students sometimes still find statistics to be an arduous task.
Right. Again, so it's a quick one, and with lack of pausing, but it's good. Only apart from variables, it's a variable, but variables. But apart from variable or variable, this is the one that she's done a good job, and her pronunciation doesn't cause for listeners to have a lot of issues with meaning. But again, I will urge you to pause and use your intonation and pronunciation marks to help you pause, and use word stress as well. A little bit of word stress was kind of missing as well in here. Okay, so I'll show you the other screen. This is the feedback from Pearson, and you can read it on your own time. You can pause the video and read it. So we'll keep moving and I'll do more practice with you. So again, pause and we'll listen to B1.
In 2005, donor countries agreed on an accord to harmonize their practice. Since then, officials have complained that too little had changed on the ground. Conferences of donors in developing countries still tend to be dominated by a small group of North-European governments, with the US often absent.
Right, so it's kind of monotone. It doesn't have a lot of stress. It doesn't have a lot of intonation, and a lot of pronunciation errors there as well. Let's look at B2.
In 2005, donor countries agreed on an accord to harmonize their practices. Since then, aid officials have complained that too little has changed on the ground. Conferences of donors in developing countries still tend to be dominated by a small group of North European governments, with the US often absent.
Right, so better pronunciation, good coverage of words, but again, intonation, he doesn't know where to pause. pausing is kind of missing, and obviously the word stress is not correct. Looking at BC1.
In 2005, donor countries agreed on an accord to harmonize their practices. Since then, aid officials have complained that too little has changed on the ground. Conferences of donors in developing countries still tend to be dominated by a small group of North European governments, with the US often absent.
Right, great. So this is a good response, obviously, and she uses the sentence stress as well, intonation, a little bit of pausing there as well. But again, I feel that it was a little bit too fast, and you could add a little bit more pause and use punctuation marks to help you pause there as well. Okay, next one. Again, you can read, what it was. Obviously, PD gives their own feedback, and you can read Pearson's feedback as to, what are the things that were missing. Incorrect pronunciation. So look at C1 here. It says incorrect pronunciation, some consonant vowels does not affect understanding. So it does have some of the pronunciation errors, but where it doesn't affect the understanding and you can convey your meaning, it still gives you C1. Right, so you should know that. All right, read aloud 5. So we'll look at B1 now.
The climate for doing business improved in Egypt more than in any other country last year, according to a global study that revealed a wave of company-oriented reforms across the Middle East. The World Bank rankings, which look at business regulations, also showed that the pace of business reforms in Eastern Europe was overtaking East Asia.
Right. So if I were not, I was not reading. If I was not reading this paragraph and just listening, I would really not struggle understanding what the lady was saying. So definitely, it affects a lot of understanding, and the pronunciation is just, I don't know, horrible. It's not easy for anyone to understand what the lady was saying. So you don't want to be in her shoes, and you certainly want to improve your pronunciation. Let's look at B2 now.
The climate for doing business improved in Egypt more than in any other century last year, according to a global study that revealed a wave of company-oriented reforms across the Middle East. The World Bank rankings, which look at business regulations, also showed that the pace of business reforms in Eastern Europe was overtaking East Asia.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of pronunciation errors, and also he read a country as I think something else, convention or something. So obviously you do want to make sure that the word that you're reading is exactly the word. So your attention should be very much focused, but obviously these are some of the things that you will make note of when you are reading it silently. Okay, so that's the reason why you're given a chance to read it silently, so that you get understanding of the meaning. So understand the meaning as well. If you don't understand the meaning, then you're just reading words that don't mean anything. So chunk the words into meaningful groups, understand what the article is about, and that's how you will be able to do sentences. But that's a skill that develops by practice, by practicing at least 100 of the read alouds before you go into your actual test. Okay, let's look at C1.
The climate for doing business improved in Egypt more than in any other country last year, according to a global study that revealed a wave of company-oriented reforms across the Middle East. The World Bank rankings, which look at business regulations, also showed that the pace of business reforms in Eastern Europe was overtaking East Asia.
Right, too fast, right? So there is no intonation, intonation rise and fall. So it was kind of monotone. It was good pronunciation. People can understand what she's trying to say, but again, she's not emphasizing, not using the word stress as well. So again, the word stress was kind of missing here as well. You might read, see here as well, the pronunciation standards. It talks about the response is spoken at a conversational rate, and response demonstrates good phrasing and smooth word emphasis. Well, actually, for me, she didn't do good justice with the with word stress and intonation. So all these C1 level response will get you there, even if your pronunciation is good and you're not making a lot of pronunciation errors. So keep that in mind. You can pause and read the other sample responses. Let's go on to read aloud item number 6. So again, pause the video here do the read aloud, and then come back and we'll review B1. All right, let's look at B1.
In a genuine republic, the will of the government is dependent on the will of the society, and the will of the society is dependent on the reason of the society. In Federalist 51, for example, James Madison claimed that the extent and structure of the government of the United States make it dependent on the will of the society.
All right, let's look at B2.
In a genuine republic, the will of the government is dependent on the will of the society, and the will of the society is dependent on the religion of the society. In Federalist 251, for example, James Madison claimed that the extent and structure of the government of the United States make it dependent on the will of the society.
Yeah, so again, you can see that the pronunciation is an issue here. And yeah, you can't have issues with pronunciation, so making that very, very clear. Let's look at C1.
In a genuine republic, the will of the government is dependent on the will of the society, and the will of the society is dependent on the reason of the society. In Federalist 51, for example, James Madison claimed that the extent and structure of the government of the United States make it dependent on the will of the society.
Yeah, good pronunciation. So you get marks if your pronunciation is good. All right, you can pause the video here and you can read. Now we're going to be talking about repeat sentence. Obviously, repeat sentence, you should speak clearly. So you're going to listen to a sentence and you're going to repeat. So you should speak very clearly and you shouldn't rush. So obviously, you saw some of the speakers, they try to speak very, very quickly and they may eat up words. So don't want to do that. Focus on the phrasing of the sentence. Phrasing of the sentence is the most important tip that I'm going to give you. And we're going to learn how to do that, how to phrase the sentence. And then we want to copy the stress and intonation patterns. So again, the reason why the speaker is using that stress pattern or that intonation pattern is because he is trying to convey a certain meaning. And you want to copy that meaning as well when you're speaking. Don't use your own stress patterns when you listen to the sentences. The strategies while listening, try to remember the sentence or take notes. If you want to take notes, you can use shorthand handwriting, keywords only for the notes. So don't try to write prepositions and stuff like that. You can just write keywords and you can just construct the sentence yourself later on. Focus on the meaning of the sentence. If you're not good in writing, don't write. I'll just ask you to focus on it, and a lot of practice is going to help you. I mean, the first day you will try to do it, you will suck at it because you will not do a good job. I can tell you that. But after doing more than 100 repeat sentences, you will do a great job. So don't worry about it. We're going to do a lot of practice. Focus on the meaning of the sentence. So if you focus on the meaning, you're basically listening for the meaning, and then if you got the meaning, you can actually reconstruct the sentence. Even if you forgot a preposition, you can fill in the preposition because you understood the meaning. It's super important that you understand the meaning. Speak when the status changes to recording. So you see recording, don't speak before that, otherwise your response may not be recorded, and that's something you want to avoid. Okay, while you're speaking, speak clearly and naturally, and make an attempt in an unknown word. So if you came across any unknown word, try to make an attempt. Don't try to eliminate it, because if you're going to eliminate, you're going to lose your point, and move on. So don't try to repeat yourself. You made a mistake, don't try to repeat yourself. Keep moving as well. Do not go back and correct yourself. So that's the point I'm making here. Give a single response. So obviously when you have when you start responding, give a single response. Don't try to correct yourself. Don't try to go back and repeat yourself. Phrasing of sentence. So this is the most important tip that I want to share with you. Each sentence has more than one phrases. So you've got a lot of words. Maybe you might have 10 words in a sentence, but you might have 3 ideas in that sentence. You might have 3 phrases in that sentence. And it's important that you get the phrases right. You remember the phrases and you understand what each phrase means. So if you can get the phrases correctly, then you will be able to construct the sentence because you got the phrases. The more phrases you understand, the better your reproduction will be. Let's look at this example. So for example, if I were to calculate the words in this sentence, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 words, right? But how many phrases? We've got 3 phrases. Next week's tutorial, that's 1 phrase, 1 idea. It's a noun phrase. On Tuesday, prepositional phrase on Tuesday, has been canceled. Verbal phrase has been canceled. So you got 3 phrases, you got 3 pieces of information, you put them together and you got a sentence, right? So that's how you want to. Next week's tutorial, this is not 3 words, it's actually 1 word. Next week's tutorial, it's not 1 word, it's 1 phrase. So that's how you want to get it. Okay. Talking about stress and intonation, again, for example, in this one, copy the stress and intonation of the speaker, not yourself. So don't try to. Now, the good thing here is you don't have to really worry about what intonation to use. You can just copy the stress and intonation of the speaker. So let's look at this example. The stress words are underlined and the following intonation is marked by down arrow. So I'm going to be stressing the underlined words and I'm going to be using the intonation patterns get outlined here. So I'm going to attend the briefing for students. I'm going to attend briefing for students. Okay, so here briefing and students are stressed, and this is what you want to do. If you hear me like that, you just repeat after me exactly how I spoke. Okay, now we're going to talk about scoring. Obviously, you get a score for content. So if all the words are in the correct sequence and no additions and deletions, you get full marks. Otherwise, you're going to lose marks. So do not repeat yourself. Oral fluency is very important. Smooth, effortless, and natural rate of speech. That is going to give you full marks as well. Rhythm and phrasing and stress are smooth. No hesitations, repetitions, and false start. By now, you know what false start means. So don't try to start yourself again. Pronunciation understandable by most regular speakers. Vowels and consonants, and you can ask most regular speakers when you talk to people, you can ask do you understand my pronunciation? If they say, well, I don't really understand your pronunciation, that's something that you want to fix. So most regular speakers should be able to understand your pronunciation. Vowels and consonants pronounced in a native like way, as well as the words and phrases stressed correctly. Partial credit applies here, so it affects your partial credit applies means that if you reproduce half of the sentence, you still get marks for half the sentence. So that is what partial credit means. It affects your listening and speaking. So you get marks for your listening and communicative skills. You get marks for listening and speaking, and you get marks for oral fluency and pronunciation. Now, do not hesitate. Obviously, oral fluency goes really, really bad. I feel oral fluency gets a really bad score when people are hesitant and nervous. So do not be nervous. Okay, moving on. So we're going to practice now. This is going to be a time practice for repeat sentence. So I'm going to play the audio. You're going to repeat. And then we'll look at B1, B2, B3. So when you listen, try to repeat the sentence. And then we'll listen B1, B2, and B3. Sorry, C1.
Most teaching staff make their lecture notes available online.
Okay, I hope you got it right. Obviously, if you didn't get it right, don't worry about it. This is the first time. If this is your first time doing it, you are not going to get it right fully, even though you're a native speaker. It's a memory test as well. So you really need to practice this skill of listening and repeating. Okay, so we're going to listen to B1.
Most teaching staff makes their lecture notes available online.
Yeah, it has pronunciation errors. So it was not easy for people to understand what he was saying. B2.
Most teaching staff make their notes available online.
Right. He's missing some words. So that's one thing that he's got. It was clear for us to understand, but he was missing some words. C1.
Most teaching staff make their lecture notes available online.
Great. So here we're going to see, what are the things. So obviously B1 speech is staccato and has weak phrasing. Several words are unclear because of incorrect pronunciation. That's what I said, the pronunciation wasn't clear of some vowels and consonants, and B2, the pace of speech is acceptable, but some words are staccato, and word stress is inappropriate, minor pronunciation and stress level errors do not affect understanding, but he missed some words too. And then in C1, most of the words are repeated accurately. Word stress, sentence level stress, and phrasing are appropriate. Pronunciation is standard. So if you got a good pronunciation, you can still score very highly as C1. But most of the words are repeated accurately, so you want to get the content right as well. Word stress and sentence level stress. If you're copying the speaker, that's how you're going to get it right. Don't try to make it yourself. Just copy what the speaker did. Okay, so moving on to this one, I'm going to play the recording and you'll listen and repeat.
There will be a conference here next summer on using the web for academic research.
Right, so this was a long sentence, right? And she paused quite a bit. So if you were looking for words, you're not going to be able to catch all of the words. But if you were looking for phrases, you must have gotten the phrases and you would have gotten the sentence right. So let's look at B1 response.
There will be a conference about the use of the web search.
Right, so he didn't get it anything right. I mean, he was really confused with what was said, because it is really, really hard. So when it's a really hard sentence, obviously you'll get even B1 when not getting anything right, because they realize that this is a really long sentence and a hard one. Let's look at B2.
There will be a conference this summer on using the web academic like this in academic research.
Right, so she's even saying like this or something like that. Don't say such things. So this is addition, right? So she's trying to add the words that are not there. So even if you didn't get the right words right, don't try to add anything. Don't try to speak to yourself. Speak out loud if you making any mistakes, but try to get whatever the words that you got, and they should be in the correct sequence as well. So if you got half right and you got the sequence right.
There will be a conference here next summer on using the web for academic research.
Yeah, so not the perfect pronunciation, not a native like pronunciation, but still she gets C1. So there will be a conference here next summer on using the web for academic research. That was what it was. Okay, so again, you can pause the video here, read the transcript, read the sample response, read the feedback from PDE Pearson. I've just shared with you one so that you can understand what are the things that they're looking for, but these are some of the skills that you want to avoid, you know, if you want to score really good or highly. Okay, repeat sentence number 3. Are you ready? Let's do it.
The university has a world-renowned school of archaeology.
Right, so let it sink in as well. So it was an easy one. It was a short one, easy one. You let it sink, think about it. You get about 3 seconds before you have to speak, and you just speak once you see that, you know, beginning in 3 seconds. You get 3 seconds, and then it begins, and then you read. So let it sink in. Think about the pattern. Think about the sequence of words. Think about the phrases that you got. Think about the meaning, and then you speak. All right, we're gonna listen to B1.
The university has awards psychology in the word.
So, I mean, she's adding some of the words that are not there. Do not do that. I mean, you will just lose your marks, even if you got the right words in the start. If you're adding some words, you'll lose the words that you got wrong in the first place. So don't try to repeat yourself. All right, B2.
The university has the world-renowned archaeology.
Right, okay, so she didn't repeat, but she made some mistakes in pronunciation, but she didn't repeat. C1, let's look at that.
The university has a world-renowned school of archaeology.
Okay, so he's got it wrong, right? Just a little bit hesitant flow, but got the sentence right. So we're going to read it. The university has a world-renowned school of archaeology. So that was the sentence. And obviously you have to come up with the correct pattern as well. And you pause the video here, read the responses, and read the feedback from Pearson for your own understanding. All right, repeat sentence 4. Let's do it.
Successful applicants will work with a large team of researchers.
So the key here is actually use your 3 seconds very wisely. Listen very, very carefully. Let it sink in, understand, and formulate the sentence in your head and then speak. If you don't formulate the sentence and you start speaking, you're going to make mistake. You're bound for failure. Okay. You're going to listen to B1 now.
Successful applicants will become the future researchers.
Right. So what she's doing is she probably not hasn't got this tip, and what she's doing is she's not formulating sentences straight away, speaking and then thinking later. So don't think later. Think before, speak after. Okay. Think and speak, not speak and then think. All right. All right. B2.
Successful applicants will work in a large team with researchers.
Yeah, so he forgot stuff like that as well. So he hasn't formulated the sentence in his mind. He hasn't taken advantage of those 3 seconds that are given to you to let it sink in and listen carefully and then repeat. Okay. C1.
Successful applicants will work with a large team of researchers.
Right. So she got pretty much everything right, but there were no long pauses. Repetitions of false starts were kind of, there were no long pauses or repetitions of false starts. The pronunciation of some vowels and consonants is standard. Successful applicants will work with a large team of researchers. So obviously let us think in and then repeat. Okay, we're going to look at number 5. Ready? Go.
Higher numbers of patients were infected than during previous outbreaks of the illness.
Right? Okay. So again, I hope that tip is really helping you out and that letting it think about the sentence and then repeat once the recording starts. Let's look at B1.
Higher number of patients has been increased for comparing to the previous.
Right, she forgot the stuff, and obviously it's a hard one. So even if you forget most of it and it's a hard one, you still get B1.
Higher numbers of patients have been affected compared to the previous outbreak of the illness.
So again, lack of words, pronunciation is not there, stress level is not there.
Higher number of patients were infected than during previous outbreaks of the illness.
So she's got the content right, but I felt that the intonation and word stress was not similar to what the speaker had used. As higher numbers of patients were infected during previous outbreaks of the illness, right? So you can pause the video here, read all the responses, and we'll keep moving. Sentence number 6. Let's do it.
The final year will consist of 4 taught courses and 1 project.
All right, I hope you got it right. So obviously this one was somewhat easy, but let's see how B1 did.
The final year we will have a project and for work.
Yeah, so you kind of forgot the information. So you can forget. I mean, I think practice, if you haven't done a lot of practice, even if your English is good, I can tell you, you'll not be able to remember stuff because you're not used to listening information and then repeating it. You have to do this exercise of memory as well. Yeah, your memory needs some time to really do this exercise and get used to, listening and responding. Normally people don't do this on a regular basis. Let's look at B2.
The final year will consist 4 courses and 1 project.
So pronunciation again is an issue here. C1.
The final year will consist in 4 courses and 1 project.
Right. I mean, B2, C1 sounded similar in terms of pronunciation, but C1 is somewhat getting all the words right, I think. So one word in the sentence repeated incorrectly, despite one hesitation. The rate of speech is acceptable in both the rhythm and phrasing are appropriate. Minor pronunciation errors do not affect the understanding. Okay, cool. The final year will consist of 4 thought courses and 1 project. Cool. That's not that hard, but I think, yeah. Okay, number 7. Are you ready? Let's go.
He started his tutorial presentation right on time.
And when another thing that I want to say is that when you try to copy someone's stress, it's easier for you to repeat their sentence. That's another thing I would say. That if you're just trying to repeat the words, actually it's actually harder that way. But if you're trying to just copy, like you're copying your older sister or something just to annoy her or something, it's easier for you to repeat a sentence because you're trying to copy exactly how she says something. Just giving a bizarre example, but I think that might stick with your brain. I mean, I give such examples so that people can kind of whatever helps, man. So if you've done that, I hope you will not forget. Try to always copy the stress and intonation, right? Okay, moving on to B1. Are we gonna look at B1 response?
Started presentation right in time.
Right. So she forgot a lot of information. She's not copying the intonation and stress anyway.
He started his tutorial lesson just on time.
Yeah, so there was an effort made to copy the stress, but obviously didn't get the content right. C1.
He started his tutorial presentation right on time.
Right on time. So exactly. So so she's trying to copy that intonation. She scores C1, right? So you can see here, speech is spoken at natural rate, as phrasing is appropriate. There are no repetitions, hesitations, or false start. Minor pronunciation error do not affect. So there are minor pronunciation errors that it doesn't affect understanding. So he started his tutorial presentation right on time. So that is great. I think you're getting really good practice in. So let's do one more. Let's do a little bit more. I don't know how many we have more, but we'll see. Are you ready? Let's do it.
The nearest automatic teller is in front of the anatomy labs.
Okay, that was a little bit hard, obviously. Having the academic topics really, sometimes you'll get technical words and we don't really know the words. You just try to make an attempt on it. Don't try to repeat it. Don't try to hesitate. All right, let's listen to B1.
The nearest teller is in front of the anatomy labs.
Hard to remember because it's quite technical. If you're not from science background, you might struggle with this one. Unfortunately, B2.
The nearest automatic teller is in front the anatomy lab.
Anatomy, okay. So anatomy lab or anatomy. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, if you haven't heard these words before, you're gonna struggle. C1, let's see if you got it better.
The nearest automatic teller is in front of the anatomy lab.
Anatomy lab. So yeah, I mean, it's somewhat, I mean, compared to those two, even if you made a little bit of mistakes, you still can score C1, which is close to 79. I think you can even score 79 with C1. But I mean, it depends on your overall, whatever you do in your speaking test, but you could score 79 with the C1. with that kind of level. So you don't really need perfection, even though you want 79. So moving on, and you can see, you can read, please pause here and read. I want you to read all the responses so that you're covering all the things that PD wants you to do. Okay. All right. Repeat sentence 9. We're gonna do this one. I think we've got 2 or more. So this one and the last one after this. So let's listen and repeat.
Newspapers are supported primarily by the sale of advertising space.
Okay, I hope you got it right. By the way, that was an Aussie accent, Australian accent. So that's interesting. If you're in Australia, you should be used to this accent by now. So let's see how B1 did.
Newspapers are supported primarily from the advertising space.
The pronunciation errors and other things. Okay, B2.
Newspapers are supported primarily by the sale of advertisement space.
I felt that the pronunciation was good, but yeah, you kind of forgot the middle part. C1.
Newspapers are sorted primarily by the sale of advertising space.
Right, good. So he's trying to match with the accent as well, but he's using the lady's intonation as a guide. All right, let's look at the transcript, and obviously the other newspapers are supported primarily by the sale of advertising space. So again, please pause here and read all of these responses. We're going to move on to our last one, which is read sentence 10. Last one. Let's do it.
Sydney is Australia's largest city, chief port, and cultural centre.
Right, and it uses that intonation that we learned. You know, it has a list of things. You've got 2 things that the intonation went up and it fell in the end, right? So you try to match your intonation pattern as well. Anyway, let's look at B1, how they did.
Sydney is the largest city in Australia, with port and commercial centre.
Right. I don't know, with the voice, I don't know. It's like it just lady just woke up or something. That yeah, I mean, you want to be careful. Have your coffee before going to the test center and be very, very clear in your voice. You know, your voice should be clear as well. I felt like, you know, what happened with that voice. It's a mystery to be solved. So B2, B2. Let's see.
Sydney is the largest city of Australia and also the chief port and culture centre.
So you got chief port and cultural center. You missed one. There were 3 things she said, and C1.
Sydney is Australia's largest city, chief port and cultural centre.
Beautiful. I think it was a good one. So you can read, you know, there was no hesitation, pronunciation standard. You got C1, very good. Sydney is Australia's largest city, chief port, and cultural center. 3 things: largest city, chief port, and cultural center. Okay, cool. All right, hope you enjoyed the lesson. We covered quite a lot of stuff today. We covered repeat sentence in detail and read aloud in detail, and few takeaways that I want you to remember just to summarize here. First of all, it's very important that you learn how to chunk words into meaningful groups. Okay, go and look at this video again, go back, maybe a few times watch this video so that you really get the idea of chunking words in meaningful phrases, right? And it will help you to repeat the sentence as well as to read aloud in a way that is meaningful. Second thing that we talked about, that is the most important one of the most important aspects of your speaking skills, is sentence stress, word stress and sentence stress, and what kind of words. So we talked about nouns, verbs, and obviously adjectives, and these are some of the things that you want to stress. because they contain key information and meaningful information. And anything that you think is meaningful information, you can also pronounce that as well. Thirdly, we talked about intonation. So intonation is super important, and we talked about some of the rules, but again, don't get bogged down by the rules. Like I said, it's not the rules, it's about your practice and getting fluent in English. Most native speakers don't know any rules. They don't really think about rules when they're speaking. And just ask yourself one question: do you know the rules of your native language? Not really. So you don't really think about the rules, and then you speak in a certain way. You just get fluent, and once you get fluent, you don't really need the rules. So I gave you some rules as a teacher. It's my job to share some rules with you, but always keep practicing. That's the only way you're going to get this. So like I said, for read aloud, more than 100 read alouds. There's a lot of material online. Go and do 100 of read alouds. For repeat sentence, same thing, same deal, more than 100. Is before you show up in the exam, that is the target. That is what you want to do to be able to get used to. Your body needs to get used to it. Your tongue used to get used to it. You need to come across a lot of words that you don't know how to pronounce them. So we talked about how to improve your pronunciation. So one of the best way of improving pronunciation is that if you have a word that you're not sure about, go on Google and write how to pronounce that word. The pronunciation comes up. You can choose American or British pronunciation and repeat it at least 20 times. The reason why we want to repeat 20 times is because our mouth or tongue needs to get used to repeating that sound, okay? And if you've been pronouncing a word incorrectly all your life, you can again train yourself to repeat the sentence 20 times. And that's about it, I think. So these are some of the things that you need to keep in mind. These are the most important things, and practice. In the end, I would leave you with this, is that practice makes perfect. And if without practice, just by learning rules and tips and tricks, it's not going to help you unless you apply them. So I've given you a lot of practical stuff here, but unless you apply it, it's useless. So go and apply, and I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Take care. Bye.